So it's winter here where I am in Australia, and today's actually a really nice sunny afternoon, but basically it's way too cold and I want a sauna. I also have this weird half put together outside room of my house where this ground here used to be just a deck, and the previous owners have made this really shoddy outside but inside area that's just attached to my house. And so I thought the perfect place to put a sauna in this area that I just don't even use would be right here. And so the plan is to make a Finnish inspired sauna, one that I can plug just directly into the wall and will get up into those hotter Finnish temperatures. The first step in my sauna building project would be to cut all the lengths I needed to make the floor, walls, and ceiling. All of the framing I would be doing out of 90 by 45 millimeter untreated pine, and here I'm just cutting all of the lengths that I had calculated that I would need and making sure to cut some nice edges, removing that factory edge. Altogether, to cut all of the pieces I needed probably only took me around 2 hours of cutting time for all 6 sides. When I started putting together each of the walls, I decided to start with one of the simpler walls. I'll put something up on the screen that gives the exact design and dimensions for my sauna. Mentally, I kind of broke the build down into the floor, the ceiling, the 2 simple walls which have nothing special about them, they'll just be covered with wood, and the door side wall and the window side wall. So this footage here is me putting together the back wall, which requires no special design. I'm just putting up some basic framing. Also, I decided to put the whole thing together with screws instead of nails, partly because I don't have a nail gun, and also it's just easy for me to do it that way. Finishing up the back wall, all I needed to do was add the smaller middle pieces. I forget what they're called. With them they make quite a nice solid frame. The next frame that I tackled, which was the first of the slightly more complicated frames, was the door side. For the door, I chose to go slightly smaller than what a typical door would be. I believe my door would be 600 millimeters wide and 1.9 meters tall, so I wouldn't have to duck, and just slightly more than shoulder width for me wide. This is for a couple of reasons. Of course, I'd have to make my own custom door for this. However, I felt it was important to keep the dimensions of the door as small as possible to keep heat in while opening the door with the sauna on. Most important of all, if you are thinking of building your own sauna, you might want to plan around having the door be shorter than the total internal height. So when you do open the door, most of that hot air sitting at the very top of the sauna can't immediately escape out of the top of the door. So unfortunately, it's not as much as I wanted, but I still keep at least 200 millimeters of space that is above the top of the door height. The wall that I'm building now is the other slightly more complicated one. It is the window wall, and I chose to keep the window fairly small as I want to retain as much heat as possible. And while I will look to be doing some double pane glass, I still want to reduce the overall footprint of the window and therefore reduce heat loss. As you see here, I did actually deviate from my original plan that I drew out. However, the only reason I didn't keep those 2 top side pieces symmetrical was to make the window more square. simply because of cuts not being exactly at right angles and so on. The window wanted to be a little bit more diamond shaped, and so having one at the bottom and one at the top on each end helped straighten things out. A quick note on the floor and the total height of the sauna. I was slightly limited by the height of the room. One of the ways that I gained an extra little bit of height was to lay the beams for the floor on their sides. This will gain me an extra 45 millimeters, and in terms of insulation shouldn't be much of an issue either, since most of the insulation is needed the higher you go. From here I was putting together all of the frames that I had built. In doing so, I nearly took out the light above me 3 or 4 times, and putting up the first wall at the back there was rather precarious as it wanted to tip on me until I got extra support from another side wall. As you'll see in later footage, I failed to plan framing perfectly for the internal wood later on, as once I put the frames together I wouldn't actually have any surface in the corner to nail the internal planks to. But I have a solution for this later. And that there is basically the framing done now. Apart from the roof, which I've made but decided was a future me problem, and a bit of extra support for the floor frame in the areas where I would be walking. As you can see, I have not left myself much room, but there should be just enough. And it's amazing what the actual ceiling here does. It looks like, to me at least, this window is terribly slanted, but if you go from the ground, it's pretty much exact to the millimeter. This is going to be the window wall where you get a little bit of natural light. Come around to this side, we're going to have a small, slightly narrower door. Back wall where we're going to have 2 tiers of seats. And yeah, that'll be enough for today.